Hi, Mark again here. We'll finish up our AVET discussion today with the Big Game series of reels. These include the Raptors and also the 30s, 50s, and 80s series. So the bigger pieces, with the exception of the Raptors, which go down into some pretty small sizes, but represent the biggest and the best from AVET. Okay, these are the Raptor Series reels. Maybe not all sizes, but a pretty good representative sampling. First off is the SX, again very, very small. On the Raptor Series, they are a little bit wider than the standard series reels. That's done because of the extra drag element. On a standard SX, you produce up to 10 pounds of drag, up to, measured at the strike position, and they button down at about 15 pounds. When you get into the Raptor, typically we come darn close to doubling that figure. In the case of the SX, given the small size, strike position gives you 17 pounds of drag, full gives you 26. At that sort of level, it is fully capable of fishing up to 50 pound, and some of the guys will even do that with straight braid, maybe 50-pound braid with a real shorty fluorocarbon top shot. On the right blank, wonderful way to go. All the Raptors share all the best features from AVET. They all incorporate a ramp for your lever. To press a button, you can go up to full and all the way back down again. They're all 2-speed with an easy ergonomic shifting mechanism, and they all feature the magnetic cast control here on the side, and they all are flawless pieces. Definitely the Raptors step up the AVET game to a whole new level. Quality of machining, I'd also say, is better than it represents on the standard pieces. Very, very nice reels. When you move up from the SX, again, just like the regular series of AVET reels, we get into the MXL, MXJ product, or the MX series. This happens to be an MXL, and again, the drag here will basically double. Instead of being that up to 10 pounds and buttoning down at about 14 or so, you wind up at 21 pounds of drag, and then buttoning down, oh boy, over 30. So again, very, very capable of fishing that 50-pound level. I own one of these, like it a lot. It's a nice size piece. Of course, my favorite size reel from AVET is a JX, which I don't have out here right now. I have the big brother to that, which is the LX, which would be our next one. The LX, again, a little bit bigger and wider. If you were to get a JX, it would be actually a little bit skinnier than the MXL. But the LX, again, in the regular series of AVET reels, the LX and JX both produce about 15 pounds of drag with free spool buttoning down to 20. When we get into that Raptor series, now we're at 28 and then at full 38 pounds. So there are guys that'll fish 80 pound on this type of piece. Again, your line capacity is somewhat limited, but they do hold more line than the standard series of AVET reels, given the way they cut the spool. Moving up from the LX and the JX, we get into the HX series, and an HX is a little bit bigger piece. Okay, moving on up to the HX series. HX series Raptor is available in 3 different configurations. There is the standard, which this is. There's a J model, which is skinnier, and there is a W model, which is wider. Like the other HXs, the Raptor versions are kind of deceptive as far as how much line they'll actually hold. The standard will hold about as much line as your basic old International 20, a little more than that, or like a 30 narrow from most manufacturers. Roughly, that would be spooled straight up, darn close to 500 yards of 80-pound braid. If you go 300 yards, you've got room for probably 120 yards of 60 pound on top of it. Given the drag on these guys, the standard models were, oh boy, they'd turn about 20 pounds of drag and button down under 30. On the Raptor versions of these reels, they're pretty beefy. They'll produce 40 pounds of drag measured at the strike position, and then going up to full, it's darn close to 50 pounds, which is darn strong. That's kind of ridiculous. More than I want to hold. Now, on all the Raptors, given the way they're done and the drag curve, you don't have that loading issue. You don't feel that feedback on the handle, which basically means that the drag setting is too high. You can get that on the standard series as you get to that outside curve, the outside limits of the drag. But on the Raptors, you're not going to get there. So you're not putting too much side load on the bearings if you're fishing at a heavier drag load. So a little less handle feedback or resistance when you turn the handle. handle on a Raptor piece. Low is real low, high is dandy on these guys on the HX series. Basically, you're at 5.4 on the high, and you drop down to a tad under 2 to 1 on the low. You go down to 1.9 on the low. So low has a lot of punch. Now that's on the standard and also the wide. On the jigging model, your gearing's a little bit faster. I think it's 2.5, 2.4 on the low, and then the high is the same, 5.4 to 1. Very, very useful size reels. Some of the guys are using them for cows, given the drake level and the casting ability where it's important to get a bait out. These guys certainly can get that job done quite well. And from the Raptor series on the big game end of things, we get into the 30s, the 50s, and the 80s. That's what's up next. Okay, this would be the 30 series AVET reels. The 30s and 50s series differ in terms of the height. Obviously the 30s are a little smaller than a 50. In the past, 30s on an IGFA standpoint are fishing 30-pound line. That's not the way we did things on the West Coast on the long range side of things. We fished them heavy. In the past, we had to modify some of the old internationals to fish the heavier drag. That's what put Cal Sheets in business basically, hot rodding the reels. AVET was really set the market on its ear when they came out with their lever drag reels, because they had excellent free spool performance from the get-go without doing a doggone thing. And again, I probably should have put a mark on the spool so you can see how they spin, but given their use of quality bearings and the number of them, they spin very, very well. So the guys in the long range fleet were able to actually fly a line of bait, which is the big advantage. And they made them topless. The advantage with a topless reel, easier to go ahead and thumb the spool, to go ahead and put a little extra pressure if you need to, clear out a backlash, level your line, just easier to work with a doggone thing. And they incorporated a lot more bolts in putting it together on their one piece of machined aluminum frames and side plates. So they're a strong piece, and you still have that open top design, which a lot of other manufacturers have gone to without. And there are some manufacturers that have been around that have made frames, like Tiburon, Baker in the old days, made frames for the existing reels that had crossbars that were kind of cumbersome and hard to deal with. So, they all were open top. The 30 wide is simply a wider version of the 30, holds more line. So using the same sort of numbers, boy, we can get 500 yards of 80-pound braid on here and have room again for probably 140 yards of 60 on top. A lot of guys are fishing these as rail pieces, especially on the narrow. Great for winching up a quality grouper, big AJ, something like that. A little more mass than you'd have on an HX series, certainly, but they're very robust. And if it's going to have a lot of troll duty, it's a great way to go. If it's going to be fished heavy, another great way to go. And given the drags that these produce, they lend themselves very, very well for fishing for cows and doing things with them that typically we'd use a much bigger reel to accomplish. In the case of the 30 narrow and the 30 wide, we're producing, 35 pounds of drag measured at the strike position. So at strike, you'll do 35. At full, they'll do 40 and above. That means, for most of us that would fish close to, say, 100-pound lines, these guys have adequate drag to do that without any modification. And they've got the free spool to fly line of bait. Some real advantages with the 30 series. When we go from the 30s, the next step up is going to be the 50s. And the 50s, bigger reel, more drag capability. A 50 will produce, about 50 pounds of drag measured at strike. And they'll button down to 57, 58 pounds worth of drag measured at the full position. The 50s really set the market on its ear when they first came out in 2005. That was a real big cow tuna year on the long range fleet. And I can't tell you how many guys wound up grabbing one of these things, taking it on the boat, and fishing it like crazy. And I know I was in a bite on the Red Rooster that year, and we landed a bunch of fish over 200 pounds. Our big was 306 on the yellowfin. I'm going to say we had close to 30 fish topping that 200-pound mark. The one real manufacturer that had no failures on that trip in 2005 were the AVETs, the guys who had these pieces. Zero failure. Yeah. Not bad. A lot of drag, again, great free spool performance. You can fly line a bait, you can even lob out a mac on these things, and it'll get out there. Less resistance means the bait's presentation is better. If its bait presentation is better, chances are you get bit. On all the big game series, you've got lugs, R-plugs, as we move up in size on the reels. There can be, I guess, an exception when we get down to the little tiny stuff like the SXs, that sort of thing. But HX is on up, you've got lugs to go back on. So if you need to harness, then you can. Moving up from the 50, the old top of the line with AVET, were the T-Rex reels. And the T-Rexes were unique for them because they incorporated a dual drag system. Yep, they had drags on both sides. They didn't incorporate a spring mechanism, so they were able to get around the existing patent, I guess, that the folks at Accurate had. So it was unique in that design, and they were the first true 100-pound capable drag reel. And they would turn an honest 100 pounds, or they do turn an honest 100 pounds worth of drag. They do these in a 30 wide and then also 50 narrow and a 50 wide. On the wides, you go with a crossbar, as you would on the standard 50 size AVET reel. The 30 is topless, but the 50 is not. On the T-Rexes, they're available with or without crossbar. On the narrows, the wides all have the crossbar, given the increased loads that are potentially there. I don't know of any human being that's going to pull 100 pounds worth of drag. It's kind of a statement piece, and it's shot over the bow to other manufacturers as far as what AVET could accomplish, and they did that quite well. And then we get into the 80 series. For the past couple of years, AVET has had an 80 wide. This happens to be their new piece, and this is an 80 narrow, and that's available. The 80s are available in 2-speed or, believe it or not, in 3-speed. This is the first 3-speed reel that I'm aware of on the marketplace. And there are 3 positions. Here's your standard shift mechanism. You push it once, depression. Now I'm in, well, actually at high, you're at 4-to-1. This gear ratio would be 2-to-1, and then for added a little more cranking power, give a little turn to the handle, punch it in all the way. Now we're at 1-to-1. 1-to-1 for gearing gives you a world of torque. You've got an awful lot of capability there. And same when we go back up, we'll give it one release, we're up one notch, and we take it all the way up to the next. You've got, like I said, 3 positions to work on. What I've found with the shifter is sometimes it'll go to that second position like here, and then give her a crank, and then you'll get back out to the full. So you may have a little bit of vagueness here, but not much. 9 times out of 10, one punch, I'm down, give a little turn to the handle, punch her again, now I'm all the way down to the first gear. And same coming back up. That's 1 position up. Now I'm back to 2-to-1. Click her again. I'm up to 3, or excuse me, to 4. Works quite well. And where would 3 gears come in handy? Well, I can think of a few places. One, if I'm fishing the kite, it's important to move that line quickly. You can certainly do that with a 4-to-1 ratio on something as tall as an 80. A difference in terms of side plate height from a 30, or excuse me, from a 50 and an 80. You can see the 80 is a bit of a beast. It's quite a bit bigger. And a 30 obviously takes that down another notch, which I can't quite fit in the scope of things here. So if you're on the kite, great way to go. If you're on a dead boat, a big boat going for big fish where line capacity is important, certainly the 80 will give you the line capacity. Having that 3rd gear, we can clear the lines more quickly at a 4-to-1, but if you get something big on, 9 times out of 10, you'll fight it at 2-to-1. You get a cow on, a giant bluefin on the East Coast, big yellowfin on a long range boat. Dropping her down 1-to-1, you have some serious cranking power. And that will turn a fish's head and bring it into the boat. That's it for the AVET Big Game Series. Pretty brief, unlike most of my videos. Hopefully that answered your questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to give us a phone call. You can get a hold of me personally, get a hold of any of the guys at the shop. They're all qualified to talk to you. They all know what they're doing. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.